Good morning. It's Thursday. It's time for work. And it must almost be spring because there's a little bit of light in the sky, actually. So we must actually be getting close to finished with winter here. Anyway, enough of the weather report. Or season report, I guess. Who cares? Enough of it anyway. Today, I'm going to diverge a little bit from where I have been. I know I bounce around a lot anyway, but I'm going to go a little bit further afield. I mentioned yesterday that I'm going to start a series talking about how I'm going to convert some of the background history of Warhammer 40k into something that's more D&D compatible without actually bringing 40k into D&D. I will be making changes, adjustments, retheming and reskinning things to kind of make it more mainstream acceptable to, as I said before, Spelljammer. But today, before I start getting into the nitty-gritty of how I'm going to actually start changing things, the first thing I wanted to do is actually talk about what I think is one of the greatest things about 40k, and it's got nothing to do with the systems or any of that kind of stuff. It has to do with the way that the history, that the story of 40k has been written. Now, some of you may or may not be aware, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of Warhammer 40k novels out there. There are also dozens and dozens, that's probably about right, of 30k novels out there. Now, these aren't labeled as 30k novels, but they are labeled as the Horus Heresy novels. And I'll go ahead and say I think they're some of the best writing that I have seen in sci-fi fantasy for years. I mean, Graham does some great stuff. A lot of them do amazing stuff. Dan Abnett writes for them, and I don't know of a writer recently, other than, maybe if I wanted to throw like Pratchett into the works, that can compete with the work that Abnett does. He's phenomenal. So, based on all of that, based on the amazing writing that goes into these novels, and the number of novels that there are, that means that there is a lot of history, there's a lot of background that I can pull from. I really want to narrow it down a bit, which is why I'm only talking about converting Fenris, the home of the Space Wolves. But to do that, I want to take a step back and talk about kind of the bigger picture before I zoom in. So, for those completely unaware, Warhammer 40,000 is a sci-fi fantasy game set in the year 40,000, thereabouts, where humanity is watched over by a nearly all-powerful but comatose God Emperor, and where he has created genetically superior beings called Primarchs, 20 of them, each of which founded a legion, later reduced to chapters, of Space Marines, which are genetically enhanced super soldiers. But each Primarch, and as such each legion, has specific quirks that basically came out either through flaws in the genetic engineering or through what they were specifically tailored to do. Each Primarch, and thus each legion, was created by the Emperor for a reason. And that's going to kind of lead into a lot of the confusion and a lot of the storytelling that goes on. It's also going to develop the overarching theme and personality for each legion. So the Ultramarines, which are kind of created to be the perfect soldiers, are always going to do the right thing and follow orders and, look good doing it. And they're just going to kind of be everything that you would expect from Captain America, for example. That's kind of the theme that they have. We're going to do the right thing, we're going to do it right, and we're going to do a good job while we're doing it. Then you've got, the Iron Fists, whose entire thing is about being the best that they can possibly ever be at building siege emplacements. If you want to withstand a siege, if you want to hole up and have a defensible position that no one can break, that's who you go to. If you want a kind of fast, mobile strike force that can get in and get out and that type of, then you want the White Scars. Each of these units has a specific quality. Taking it a bit further, some of the units have much more obscure qualities. The Thousand Sons, Magnus's Legion, their whole thing is that they were the most talented psychers in all of the known galaxy. Now, bearing in mind, when we start converting things over to D&D, psyker equals psychic, but not exactly, because 40k does not have magic. Anything which is psychic, which is magic, which is sorceress, which is kind of any of those obscure, arcane-like talents, all falls under psychers. And when I start to convert things over for Fenris, you'll start to see where that will come in. But the Thousand Sons were a legion of sorcerers. And then we get to the wolves, the space wolves. And for the longest time, in a lot of the books, all of these other legions, it was kind of understood and voiced, even by the people in the books, that it was internally understood what most of the legions were all about. But no one ever really voiced what the wolves were about. No one really wanted to talk about what the wolves were about. And then in the Heresy novels, they finally dove into it. And when they finally described what the specialty of the I'm trying to say werewolves, of the space wolves was that it was dealing death. It was being exterminators. It was being executioners. And that comes into play a number of times, because you start to see that the purpose of the wolves is to do the jobs that no one else is willing to do. Now that sounds quite negative. It almost sounds like they're kind of the whipping boys of it all, but it's really not. They're the ones that, if the Emperor just needs something done, if he doesn't want to explain why, if he doesn't want to have to say how, if he doesn't want to have to manage anything, he just tells the wolves to do it. And they go do it. that comes into play when they are the ones that are sent to sanction other legions when they go wrong. Which leads us to one of the greatest tragedies of 40k, and one of the best stories, and that is the Scourge of Prospero. Now, I love this story. Flat out, I love it. It's amazing. It's told in a pair of books, which some people believe is kind of a part 1, part 2. It's not, honestly. It's not. What you have is you have the telling of the Scourge of Prospero from the Thousand Sons perspective, and then you have it from the Wolves perspective. And it's very interesting to see the events that led up to it and followed it from the other side. Full disclosure, the Thousand Sons are actually my second favorite legion, which for a Wolves fan is strange, but yeah, that's me. So, backing off from the Wolves then, let's have a look at the Thousand Sons. The Legion of Sorcerers, the ones that delve into the arcane and the unknown. Bearing in mind that all psychic power in Warhammer 40k comes from the Warp, which is basically 40k's version of the Farplane, populated by Chaos or Cthulhu. And that's where all sorceress power comes from. Now, you have the Thousand Sons who have been researching and studying and attempting to harness this power. But then something goes wrong, and the Emperor forbids the use of this power. He says, from here forward, no more magic. Again, magic, psychic, same thing. No more magic. And the Thousand Sons go kind of with their tail between their legs back to their home world and say, well, how are we supposed to study if we can't do magic? And they basically sit there and sulk for a while. Except for their leader, Magnus, who decides, well, I know better than my father does. I need to keep studying it anyway. And that's where things get a little bit messy, because, yeah, he's breaking the rules, but he's not doing it for evil. He's doing it for knowledge. And it pays off. He has a vision. A vision that the Emperor is going to be betrayed. Magnus, using sorcery, using magic, which is banned, has a vision that the Emperor will be betrayed by Horus, his eldest son, his war master, his jewel at the crown of his existence. His favorite Primarch is going to betray him. Magnus knows this. He's seen it in a vision. And that's when he does like most of us and goes, oh, shit. If I warn him about the betrayal, he's going to ask how I know, and I'll have to say magic, and then I'm in trouble. Is there any way I can warn him without telling him I know? And he spends actually a few months deliberating how to warn his father. At which point he realizes that he's almost too late. It's about to happen. Finally, all caution to the window, he realizes, I have to warn him. Even if I do get in trouble for it, I have to warn him. And then he realizes, oh wait, I'm about 3 months' journey from Earth. I'll never get there in time. Because he's waited so long, he now can't actually make the trip in time to warn him. So, what does he do? He turns to magic again. He says, well, obviously Father won't be too mad if I use magic to warn him, to save him, right? I mean, if I'm saving his life, then he has to be okay with me using magic to do that. That's the Thousand Sons' justification. It's okay if we break the rules for the right reasons. That is a repeating thing for them. So he basically astral projects himself to Earth, appears in front of the Emperor, and proceeds to warn him that the War Master Horus is going to betray him. To which the Emperor gets pissed off because someone just astrally projected into his chamber. Now, there's a lot of other stuff going on involved with that. Something called the Astronomicon, and some power that was being used to kind of magically guide ships without the ships realizing they were being magically guided, and a whole thing that was disrupted. I'm not going to get into all of that. That's detail that we don't need for this. But the Emperor was angered that his son had broken his edict. And what happened? Well, through a series of events that followed, the wolves were sent. The decree was made that the Thousand Sons had broken the edict of the Emperor, that they had continued to dabble in arcane sorcery, which was strictly forbidden, and that they were to be excommunicated. Reading between the lines, the wolves were sent to execute them, which they did, for the most part. They razed their home world until there was nothing left standing. And the grand irony of this was that the Thousand Sons, who had been loyal, who were trying to save the Emperor, who wanted to help, even if they were breaking the rules to do it, looked around and realized, we're either going to die here, or we can try to escape into the warp. And eventually they chose that they did not want to die, which we can't really blame them for. And they went into the warp, where in order to survive, they ended up binding themselves to warp entities, to what is referred to in 40K as demons. And they became monstrous, inhuman demon creatures. And they were branded a traitor legion. But unlike the others, unlike the ones who actually chose to side with Chaos and decided to betray the Emperor, the Thousand Sons never did. The Thousand Sons were forced into it. They tried to help and got banished to the warp for it. For intents and purposes, it was either that or die. Because even though they tried to explain themselves, even though they tried to convince the wolves that they were not traitors, the wolves had been told to exterminate them. And they followed through. Even to the point that they didn't let up on them once they were in the warp. But that's a story for another day. As you can see, I'm here. It's been a lot longer video than I normally post, but hopefully you've enjoyed the story. Hopefully you've enjoyed this bit of history. Check out the Horus Heresy novels, especially, like I said, the ones involving Dan Abnett, the ones involving the Thousand Sons and the Space Wolves. There's some amazing writing in there. Have a great day. Like, subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another Disney video. Bye-bye.